Good evening and welcome to a Lightening the Load series with Creating Equalz, and that's me, Laney Holland.
Myself, April Dawn.
This evening we're going to just have a discussion regarding the Zero Tolerance International Day around female genital mutilation. This was something the United Nations started and continue to follow yearly on the 6th of February. With the vision of ending FGM by the year 2030. So we're in the final decade of eradication. What have we got to say about that, April?
Well, I think we've got a lot to say about it, haven't we? You know, Creating Equalz has been working with towards the eradication of FGM for quite a number of years now. And I think with regards to our focus and commitment to it, it's never ending. The organisation Creating Equalz was founded because of the work that Laney had started with FGM in the Northamptonshire community. And maybe you should share with our audience what that looked like at the time. How many years ago was that now? 14 years ago?
10 years, so 2014. Well, 2014 is Creating Equalz, but we started, remember, way before that, of a community call for action back in Council for Ethnic Minority Communities days. So really, since 2009, we've been trying to support our locality, to help understand, educate, and advocate, but also to be able to be those people that speak out, the comrades, those that understand that sometimes you have to be an activist to make changes. But you know, on reflection, April, what we now know about FGM and what we thought we knew about FGM is we still know very little. Yeah, we've got data, we've got statistics, and in fact, the United Nations are saying that, you know, even though there's 200 million women and girls that are alive today that have experienced or undergone female genital mutilation. And just for you that maybe don't know or need reminding, it's injury or removal of any area of the female genital mutilation, the female genital any injury or removal of the female external genitalia. That was a bit of a mouthful. So anything that's caused upon that for non-medical, non-therapeutic reasons. So that's the definition, really important to understand. And that can include piercing of the clitoris, piercing of the labia, whether it's majora or minora. We have to, yes, we know that there is recorded practices in 30 African countries and other countries that surround or follow certain practices, for example, Sri Lanka, India, in the Bora region. We know it's just not an issue that affects the Black community. So we have to be really aware, and I think this is the stuff that we started to really understand and really unpick. And I think, do you remember, April, we travelled to a school in a very, very white rural area, and a lot of the teachers were, oh, I don't know why we're here, you know, we don't have this problem in our school. But when we started to unpick the data and what that looked like, there was a real interest and a change of minds and hearts around integration, relationships changing, how that kind of interaction of relationships changes the landscape of female genital mutilation and those that are exposed or at risk. So yes, we know 200 million women today have experienced female genital mutilation. We're also told by the United Nations that at least a third less of that now are practicing in communities. So it's good. We're seeing the movements in the right areas. But what does that mean for us here in Northamptonshire and the work that we do nationally around still trying to get into areas to really help people unpick what that looks like. And I think, April, you're our huge advocate and activist around cultural competency. I think this is a really important time for you to kind of have your say on how you feel organizations are or are not, or what they can do better to become equipped in terms of understanding the relationship of doing this sort of work and the knowledge of cultural competency.
Cultural competency is super important, as we know. FGM is often rooted in cultural beliefs and traditions. And it's also often sometimes seen as a rites of passage, or a way of controlling a woman's sexuality. But we must understand that it's not endorsed by any religious text at all. So that understanding around the diverse communities that we live in, and why the FGM is prevalent in those communities, it's important that practitioners actually educate themselves and have that professional curiosity behind what FGM looks like. FGM may not happen in isolation. There may be other types of abuses that are happening in those environments as well. We know that FGM is part of the Domestic Abuse Act. It's an abusive practice. It's sexual violence. Okay, it is a form of sexual violence, and that should not be underestimated. We need to have an intersectional approach around FGM, and FGM requires a comprehensive intersectional approach when it involves healthcare providers, educators, people that make the policy, our law enforcement agencies, our leaders, community members. That collaboration across the different sections is essential to help to, when we talk about the elimination of or zero tolerance and elimination of FGM. We can only do that together. And to do that, there must be that understanding, that cultural, competent professionals, people in our communities, in order to be part of this campaign to fight against FGM. There is also that need to have a sensitive approach to FGM as well. Effective interventions to end FGM must be culturally sensitive and also community led as well. We need the help of the community to get that understanding around respecting the local customs and the traditions, while we fight to eradicate this very, very harmful practices that impact the women and girls of our community. So engaging in dialogue, building that support, looking at alternative practices that can help facilitate change. And that means educating ourselves and also educating those relevant communities as well moving forward. FGM 10 years ago was a hot topic. We at Creating Equalz see that it's not so relevant in conversations when we're talking about violence against women and girls, but it hasn't gone away. It hasn't gone away. And if we're talking about harmful practices around abuse, around the trauma of abuse, FGM needs to be a topic that is kept very much in discussion and on the table. I think I've said a lot there. We
Yeah, but
cannot in Northamptonshire afford to not talk about it. And Laney and myself, we believe that the groups or the collaborations that who are around the table talking about domestic abuse and sexual violence have got to be on top of this. Where there may be FGM, there may be other abusive practices, and we can't ignore that.
It's true, and all we have to think about, April, was the prosecution back a few years ago, and I believe it was in the Ugandan community where statistics are actually quite low in terms of prevalence, but actually underpinning that was a lot of practice around witchcraft. So that's, I believe, how the prosecution became easier to evidence, was the fact that there was ongoing recordings, sightings, and knowledge around witchcraft. So as you state, other harmful practices also can sit side by side. But as you were talking, April, I was reflecting back to the time when we really struggled to infiltrate health and understanding why are we not all doing the same thing the same way? Why are we not all asking the same question? Why are we not all escalating in the same way? Why are we not all accountable? And by we, I'm talking about public sector bodies, local authorities, and your voluntary community and social enterprise sectors. I mean, it's quite radical. That's why I decided to become a midwife. I was fed up of knocking on the health door and not getting any buy-in. So I'm not suggesting anyone does something as radical, but as April has alluded to, days like the Elimination Day, summer holidays where we see a prevalence in terms of border controls response. This is not just for a set periods of time, dipping in, dipping out. We cannot take our eye off the ball. We cannot, until we've collected data from Freedom of Information requests to show that not only are numbers reducing, that our numbers are reducing because of the increase of awareness and the response of organisations, we can't take our foot off the pedal. We've only got 6 years to go. And I remember one of the first days that we celebrated International Zero Tolerance. And I thought, wow, that's 16 years to go. That's a lot. That's a long time to do some work. And now we're 6 years. And I'm proud of what we've achieved. We've delivered multiple training. I mean, looking back at the last time we did a count, over 600 people that we've educated around female genital mutilation. And they're organisations that have financially committed to our training. We've trained the MASH team. We've trained football coaches through the PFA leagues. We've trained teachers. We've trained ESOL teachers. We've had a plethora of audience that are really
domestic abuse organisations too.
Domestic abuse organisations, absolutely. But you're right. We feel that the gas seems to have been lifted a bit, and we don't know why that is. Whether that's because we're getting better at the mandated training that's available through the Home Office, through the NHS England website, and it's enough to give us enough information to do the right thing, or is it still where we were 4 years ago, where we felt that we'd got somebody within the police, a named person in the police, a named person in our children and young people's board, a named person within the safeguarding board, and then it disappeared. People moved on. People were promoted. People had decided that they were going for other roles, and we just have struggled to understand our local network and accountability. And if we have, then maybe other people have. And if and it's just us in isolation. Oh, sorry, can you hear me now? Oh, and it's just us in isolation. Why, when we continue to wave the working towards eradication flag? I know our locality struggled, and in terms of our partners over at Milton Keynes and in places like Derby and Leicester, had a very, very different structure, pathway, and buy-in. I feel it's gone a bit quiet here, and I don't know how we're going to weather 6 years, April, of eradication.
So eradication, another 6 years. In order to do that, Northamptonshire and beyond, it requires effort. It quite requires efforts from an individual level, community, national, international. And if we're looking at our locality on a community level and county-wide level, it's got to be these complexities, these social complexities, looking at the cultural and economic factors of our community, who perpetuate this practice. And if we really do believe in protecting women and girls against this violence, including this particular violent abuse, it's got to be a sustained effort and continuous. We cannot pick and choose the times we speak about it. It needs to be on the table continuously in order to for that change to happen. And if we're going to be part of this day, it's not just one day, it's every day. It's not just summer, it's every day. Let's keep the conversation on the table.
Absolutely. And, you know, in terms of our podcasting series of Lightening the Load, we are inviting you to engage with us to help lighten the load for the women survivors out there, for those that are still isolated in their communities, the newly arrived communities that are seeking asylum, that have limited networks, to help and support those that have already experienced cultural trauma and are activated by other elements of trauma that they experience access in the United Kingdom. So there's things you can do. We've got a TACT programme, Talk About Cultural Trauma. It's aimed at women who've experienced trauma, and those women are particularly from Black and Brown communities. And it helps the women understand what part of processing is available for them.
Absolutely. So I think that's it. We've talked enough. We want to keep this conversation on the table, especially obviously in our locality, in the Northamptonshire area. And we invite all of the organisations that are around the table, around the domestic abuse and sexual violence boards, in the west and the north of the county, to really pay attention and to ensure that your teams are culturally competent when dealing with working with diverse communities, vulnerable and diverse communities. Cultural competency is key. If we miss the point, you know, it has devastating consequences down the line. And we know this. So let's pay attention and really educate ourselves around areas such as this. Should we say
Absolutely.
bye now?
You can tell how live we are. Even my dog has something to say about this subject. But honestly, on a more serious note, we can offer cultural competency training. We offer cultural trauma training. We've started the sexual violence recovery toolkit, where we'll be focusing on harmful practices. So we're still doing our work, but we ask you, with the theme this year, the woman's voice, the woman's choice. What are you doing as a comrade, What are you doing as a sister in arms? What are you doing as an organisation with a duty of care to help eliminate female genital mutilation by 2030? Jump onto our website, www.creatingequalz.co.uk, where you can leave us a message and we'll follow up and we'll get back to you.
Fantastic. Okay, let's say goodbye. All right. Raise the awareness, tell 5 people about this video, and hopefully they'll tell 5 people and tell 10 people. I don't know, Laney's got a formula.
Tell 10 and end FGM. If 10 people tell 10 people who tell 10 people of something they've learned tonight, then
Tell
that's
10, tell
a
10.
lot of people. Not 5,
Absolutely.
but 10. So tell 10 about FGM
Okay.
and tell 10 about booking in with us with some training around how we can support you to work towards the agenda of eliminating female genital mutilation by the year 20.
That's it. Peace and out. Thank you.
Good night.